The business end of the season is well and truly underway. It's time we rank every single League One club's final fixtures of the season. Let's go. As always, if you do find value from the content, please make sure you leave a like and subscribe. It's free to do so. Lots of different content like this coming your way between now and the end of the season. Let's have a go at ranking every team's run-in. Let's begin. So first and foremost, let me show you what looks like on the eye a very confusing Excel spreadsheet. I promise you, it's not as complicated as it looks. Essentially, this is every single game between now and the end of the season for all 24 teams. I've also highlighted in that black bolding the defining games in my eyes for all the teams chasing the top 6, chasing the top 2, and also those fighting against relegation. They're also colour-coded, and that's what I'm going to explain to you now. The colours represent a difficulty level, and that's all generated from the current league table. Of course, anything can happen in Sky Bet League One, we know that, but it does give us a rough guide. An opposition who are currently sat between 16th and 24th at home are in a darker green. A lighter green represents a team who are currently between 16th and 24th away. The amber colour is an opposition who are currently between 7th and 16th. A lighter red is a top 6 team at home, and a darker red, the hardest game based on our league table key, is a top 6 team away from home. Hopefully that makes sense. And of course, every team will be put into one of our tiers, and this is our tier list. So our bottom tier is ouch. It's an ouch run-in. Above that, we've got not kind. Above that, our middle tier is we'll take it. The one above that is solid. And our top tier is no excuses. Which, of course, there's plenty of excuses. But based on their final games of the season, they've got no excuses. Let's begin with the first team, Carlisle United. So starting off with Carlisle, if I'm being totally honest, I think they are already relegated and have been for quite a few weeks, but we'll still look at their run-in and still discuss their defining fixtures in my eyes. The next 4 games are going to be interesting. They've got Barnsley, Shrewsbury away, Stevenage at home and Peterborough away. So they've got 3 games against the top 6, 2 at home and 1 away. They've then got what I think is a run of games which could be interesting. Lincoln at home, Northampton away, fellow relegation rival away from home in Cheltenham, Blackpool and Wycombe, and then a Pride Park visit on the final day. It's a very tough run-in. 4 teams currently in that top 6, 2 away, 2 at home, plus Northampton away and Lincoln and Blackpool. Again, even the games Shrewsbury and Cheltenham, they've got more of a chance, and you'd say they've got more to play for. I think Carlisle have been relegated for a while. I think it's a very difficult run-in. There's a bit of a chance of something, but even if they do that something, I still don't see a way out. I think Carlisle have got a ouch run into the season. Fleetwood Town then next. They're currently still in the fight to stay in League One, and their next 3 games for me are their most defining because all 3 are at home. Bristol Rovers at home, Charlton at home and Cheltenham at home. That's an opportunity when you are still in a relegation fight to get that home form ticking, and 3 on the bounce is a great chance to do so. Bristol Rovers, Charlton and Cheltenham. They won't be easy games. Especially Bristol Rovers and Cheltenham won't be easy because of course they're currently in the fight with Fleetwood. Then it gets quite tricky. You've then got to look at Oxford away and Blackpool away, 2 teams chasing the top 6 on the road. And they say their final 4, Northampton, Peterborough away is going to be tough, Leyton Orient away will be tough, but Burton at home to finish the season. That could be everything for Fleetwood in their fight against relegation. I think their defining games is the next 3, and obviously the final game of the season against Burton Albion. I think it's between not kind and we'll take it. I look at Oxford away, Blackpool away and Peterborough away, and even Orient away. They've had a good home record this season, Orient. But I look at those home games and I see a chance there. For that reason, I think Fleetwood will probably take it. It's the lower end of that tier, but I'm going to put them in will take it. There's an opportunity and a chance, and Fleetwood, realistically, that's all they wanted, a chance to stay in League One. Darren Moore's Port Vale are up next, and I look at these final games and I'm even more concerned than I was before. There's some very, very tricky games in there, and as we've seen, the bounce since Darren Moore's been appointed hasn't bounced. It's been a total flop. He has not galvanised that group, and we haven't seen an improvement. I look at these final games and I am concerned. Some huge games, but also in the mix with some very, very difficult ones. They've still got to go to Bolton, Peterborough, Wigan. They've still got to host Oxford, Bristol Rovers, Exeter and Wycombe. The final game against Cambridge, similar to Fleetwood and Burton, that could be huge. Fleetwood versus Burton, Port Vale versus Cambridge. That could be a very, very interesting final day when you look at these relegation candidates. But I'm looking at those games and there's some tricky ones in there. Plenty of sides that could maybe be playing for nothing. I mean, Orient, Wigan, Exeter, Wycombe will be safe by that point, you'd imagine. They could even be safe. They're not in this relegation fight for me. So you've got teams there that have got nothing to play for, and maybe that helps Port Vale because they'll have everything to play for. But you've also got teams that are still chasing the promotion spots, and again, that's not very kind. Port Vale, I'm concerned with their recent form. I'm concerned with the way they're approaching this run-in. For that reason, I think it's an ouch. Not just because of their current situation, but because of those games coming up. There's some big ones and some extremely difficult ones as well. Cheltenham Town next, and their next two games aren't very kind. Barnsley away and Peterborough at home. However, for me, those games don't define their season. That's not what's going to keep Cheltenham in this league. If you get a result, fantastic. But I'm looking at Carlisle, Bristol Rovers, Burton, Lincoln, and before that, you've got to travel to Fleetwood as well on the 29th of March. But I'm looking at that run. Carlisle at home, Bristol Rovers at home, Burton away, and Lincoln at home. That, for me, is where Cheltenham can pick up some points, and they're going to need to pick up some points. You've got Exeter at home in there as well, Leyton Orient away. Stevenage away on the final game of the season is, again, that's not very kind. But I'm looking at that chunk before the final day, between the 9th of April and the 20th of April. Again, it's going to be extremely tight. I don't think it's an ouch because you've got to play Fleetwood, Carlisle and Burton, and the best way of getting out of it is beating the teams also down there with you, and they've got a chance to do that. So I wouldn't say it's an ouch. I'd say it's probably not very kind. For Shrewsbury, I think their next three games will have to save them. Exeter at home, Carlisle at home, and Oxford at home, because on the road, they've still got some very, very tricky games. Bristol Rovers away, Pompey away, Bolton away, and Charlton away too. They have got Leyton Orient to finish the season off, and Wycombe sandwiched within those away fixtures. But I'm looking at that next three. Exeter, probably on the beach. Carlisle, probably already relegated. Oxford, of course, I'm hoping we're still in the fight for a top six finish by the time we get to the 29th of March. But I'm looking at the next two, and even Oxford being that a home game. Wycombe and Leyton Orient are going to be massive, but I'm looking at those away games as that biggest issue. They're difficult, and they're all still fighting for stuff, maybe less so Charlton. I think Shrewsbury, it could be worse. Is it ouch? It's probably ouch or not very kind. If you don't get anything from the next three, I think Shrewsbury are in a whole lot of trouble. Because that final, 5 or 6, are very difficult. I'm going to say not kind, but it could easily be ouch. Gary Monk's Cambridge are next on the agenda, and I'm looking at it. It's very, very tough. I'm looking at Reading away and Wycombe at home the 16th of March and the 23rd of March. You've got to try and get a run together when you're down there, and whether that be a few draws on the bounce, a win, of course, very handy. Taking it off a relegation rival in Reading would be fantastic. Of course, Port Vale to finish the season off on the 27th of April would be a great way to end the season, depending on what that looks like and what the league table looks like at that point. But getting a run together for Cambridge is so challenging because they're sandwiched with some very tricky games. Barnsley away, Blackpool away, still got to play Derby at home too, Bristol Rovers on their travels, and both the games where they are playing a fellow relegation rival, they're away as well, Reading and Port Vale, and I think home advantage is going to be massive, and Cambridge are better at home. They are much better at home, and when that place is bouncing, they can make an atmosphere, they can make that pitch feel really small and get a result. And their biggest games for me are on the road. So for Cambridge, I think it's probably an ouch. The new manager bounce is going to be important, and I'm sure Gary Monk will provide that. Got a 1-1 draw in his first game. I think they're an ouch for me when ranking their final games of the season. Burton Albion are the next team, and I think it's pretty plain and simple. Their final three games is what's going to keep them in the league, and also a game on the 23rd of March with Port Vale at home. But their final three, look, they're not kind. No game's kind. But to finish the season off having to play Cheltenham at home, Reading at home and Fleetwood away, that defined Burton's season. That keeps Burton in the league. Of course, if they pick up some fantastic results, Pompey away, Barnsley, Oxford and Stevenage away before that, fine, doesn't really matter. But if they're still in the fight, and I'm looking at the games before that and prior to that run, they're not very nice. Those three are huge. Burton have to pick up probably 6, of course, if they're still in the fight, probably 6, 7 points from Cheltenham, Reading and Fleetwood. And if you do that, you take points off those teams and you climb out of it with no trouble at all. And having to play those games, 2 of them at home as well, if you're counting Port Vale at home a few weeks prior, I think it's okay. Of course, you've got to get the result. And this is all a bit of prediction, and that's an easier game because of this and because of that. Ultimately, it's down to how Burton perform. They could stink out the gaff and lose all 3, and that in my eyes would probably relegate them if they haven't gone to Fratton Park on the 12th of March and got 3 points. That's football. But I'm looking at that chunk of 3, 16th of April, 20th of April, and the final game on the 27th of April. That is going to be so significant for Burton. I think I'm going to put them in, we'll take it. Because they've got very difficult games before that. I'm not shying away from it. But having those 3 games to finish the season, I think they'll probably take that. Reading next, and I think they're the final team currently in this relegation scrap. And it's a very, very tricky run-in. It's a very, very tricky final fixtures. They've got the most away games still to play in the division. Derby away, Bolton away, Bristol Rovers away, Barnsley away, Burton away, Blackpool away. They finished the season with 4 back-to-back away games. That's not very nice. It's very, very challenging. And similar to Cambridge trying to highlight a defining run, it's tough. I think Cambridge and Northampton, the 2 home games on the 16th of March and the 29th of March, is where points could be won, and they need to be won because they're not nice. Pride Park visits, Bolton visits, Barnsley visits. You maybe look at Burton being a fellow relegation rival, that could be handy. But still to go to Blackpool as well on the final day is a very, very nasty run-in. I think it is definitely an ouch, for sure. Reading, they're not completely, I mean, they are down there, but they're not completely abandoned. And it's a good job, because those games are very, very difficult. I think it's an ouch, for sure. We now move over to the mid-table section. I don't see Northampton, Bristol Rovers, Wigan, Charlton, Wycombe or Exeter either getting relegated or getting promoted this season. So we're not going to spend loads of time on them. To help me rank them, I'm going to give them a final difficulty points tally. And again, we have to refer back to our key to work out how we got there. So a darker green fixture is 1 point, lighter green 2 points, amber 3 points, lighter red 4 points, and darker red is worth 5 points. So based on their fixtures, we're going to give them a certain number of points. That's going to then help us put them in the tier. So for Exeter, I've given them 23 points. So a pretty nice, I hate that word, but a pretty nice run-in, to be quite frank. I think they're going to be much happier this season than they were last season. They had a very difficult run into the campaign. 23 points is pretty kind. Burton, Cheltenham, Port Vale, home games as well. I think that's solid for Exeter. I'm going to put them in the solid tier. At Wycombe, I've given them 25 points. Still to play Pompey, Blackpool away, Derby, Shrewsbury, Port Vale and Carlisle back-to-back on the road as well. I think Wycombe, though, they're safe, they're sound. I think they'll take that. At Charlton, I've given them 22 points, which I can tell you is the lowest difficulty point score out of every club in the league, which means they, on paper, have got the easiest run-in. It won't be easy, but it's on paper the easiest run-in. So for that reason, we've got to have one team at least in that top tier. I've got Charlton to have no excuses to stay where they are. I don't see them getting promoted or relegated, but it's nice to know, Charlton, you haven't got too many difficult ones coming up between now and the end of the season. At Wigan, I've got them on 24 difficulty points. Still got to travel to Fratton Park, but some home games in there: Blackpool, Burton, Port Vale, and a final game of the season at Wigan on the 27th of April against Bristol Rovers. I think it's one of the better run-ins we're going to see and break down today. I'm going to put them in the solid tier. And joining Wigan, I've got Bristol Rovers joining them in that solid tier. They've got 23 difficulty points, only one less than Wigan. They've still got to play Peterborough and Bolton, but some home games against Shrewsbury. Cambridge travelled to Cheltenham as well. I see Bristol Rovers in that solid tier there. And finally, of the mid-table teams, we've got Northampton, who I've got on 25 difficulty points. So the hardest, or joint hardest, with Wycombe out of all of the other teams in the middle of the league table. Barnsley away still to play. Derby at home as well, but Port Vale, Carlisle, Fleetwood, there's some games in there I expect Northampton to win. They've done it tremendously well in their debut season back in Sky Bet League 1, and a fairly, well, we'll take it kind of running for them. Lincoln City are our next talking point, and that's because I see them having an outside chance of a top 6 finish, but a chance is a chance, and fair play to Lincoln. They're in fire form, and they've got themselves into a position heading into the run-in where they could finish in the playoff places. Jake is smiling like a treasure cat. I can see it already. For me, they're defining games. Oxford, Leyton Orient, Carlisle and Reading. That chunk of 4 is going to be huge. Oxford, I think they've got to beat Oxford to finish in the top 6. Leyton Orient at home, and then back-to-back games against relegation sides. Carlisle, who I think already are relegated, and Reading, who will be fighting for their lives. I'm then looking at Wigan on the 13th of April. I think that's a very winnable game, not because Wigan are easy, but because they'll have nothing to play for, I imagine, at that point in the season. Similar maybe to Bristol Rovers earlier on the 16th of March. The final game of the season at home, Pompey, is going to be very, very interesting. But before that, they've got to play Cheltenham, and we don't know the situation of Cheltenham in their relegation fight on the 20th of April, of course, sitting here now. Lincoln City, I think there is a chance. I think they've got some games there that are certainly winnable. They've got fixtures that I think are going to be very defining. When ranking Lincoln, I think it's pretty solid. They've got winnable games in there. Cambridge, Carlisle, Reading and Cheltenham. They've also got teams like Wigan, Bristol Rovers that could be on the beach by that point. Oxford away is going to be huge. Final game of the season against Pompey could be everything, but it's at home. I think Lincoln is a solid run-in. Leyton Orient up next. Time to rank their final fixtures of the season and break them down. What a season they've had. I've been slightly different with the way that I've looked at their defining games because it's about staying in the hunt and staying in the race. And they've got some very difficult games between the 16th of March and the 1st of April. That is make or break. They get through those games, they've got a real chance. Stevenage away, Exeter at home, Lincoln away, Peterborough at home. Because I look at their final 4, take away Derby away, which is going to be very difficult on the 13th of April. You've got to look at Cheltenham at home, Fleetwood at home and Shrewsbury away. And before that, they've got Port Vale tonight as of recording, so you'll know how they got on in that game when it comes out. But I'm looking at that 4. Stevenage, Exeter, Lincoln and Peterborough. That's a very difficult 4, and one that I think that suggests they either do it and they stay in the race, not necessarily do it in terms of getting the top 6, but stay in the hunt, or 4 short, which, I say 4 short, this is Leyton Orient who got promoted this season. It would be a fantastic season, whatever the final outcome. I think they'll probably take it. They've got Port Vale, Cheltenham, Fleetwood, Shrewsbury, but it's that 4 there, and Derby slightly later on in that run-in, that is going to define whether or not they stay in the hunt or don't. I think they'll probably take it. For Blackpool, I think it comes down to a set of 3 games between the 6th of April and the 13th of April. Cambridge at home, Fleetwood at home, and probably relegated Carlisle. Sorry, Carlisle, you get a bit of stick in this one, aren't you? On the 13th of April, Blackpool visit them. Reading away on the final game of the season is going to be very interesting because the next 4 aren't very kind. Northampton away, Wigan away, Derby away, and then Wycombe at home. 3 away games back to back for Blackpool isn't very nice. They've got they've got a winnable chunk in the middle, if you like, of these final games. And then Barnsley at home, going to be tricky. Reading away, not going to be easy, depending on where Reading sit at that point in the season. I think it's probably quite mixed. It's either solid or we'll take it. Blackpool at home, you'd expect them to beat Cambridge and Fleetwood. And you give Blackpool a chance at home in all of their games, to be honest. They've got a fantastic home record, the best in the league as of recording. Away from home, they're probably around mid-table in that bottom half. So when I look at Northampton away, Wigan away and Derby away, how's that away form going to hold up? If they can turn it around, they've got all the chance in the world. I'm going to be nice with Blackpool. I trust Blackpool are going to give a good account of themselves. They always do that in the final games of the season. They've got that trait about them, especially with Neil Critchley in charge. I see them looking at it in a solid fashion. I think it's solid for Blackpool. So, Oxford United. I was hoping for a nice run-in, and I think we've got a fairly mixed one, to be honest. Bolton away, very tricky. That's tonight. I'm very nervous. I'm making this video, so I haven't got to think about that game kicking off in about an hour's time. Port Vale away, Shrewsbury away, Fleetwood at home, and Lincoln at home. That section is huge, especially Lincoln at home, Shrewsbury away, Fleetwood at home, and you've got to stick Port Vale in there as well. Between the 16th of March and the 1st of April, they're going to be some very, very defining games, because after that, Burton away, I'm looking at Peterborough and Stevenage. To have to play Lincoln and Stevenage still is, of course, very tricky, but it keeps this chase not in our hands, but at least we're playing the teams with us. It gives us an opportunity to take points off them. Of course, it also gives them a chance to take points off us, and that could kill our hopes of a top 6 finish, of course. But I'm looking at Lincoln, Shrewsbury, Fleetwood, and also specifically teams who are with us, Lincoln at home and Stevenage at home. Having them at home, I think, could be very, very important. I'll take it. I think we'll take it. Bolton away is tough, of course, but every game's tough if you don't perform. I think we'll take it. That's where I'm going to put us. Stevenage are up next. It's pretty mixed. Tricky as well. Bolton, Peterborough, Barnsley, Peterborough. That game is away from home. And of course, Oxford on the 20th of April away from home. That's going to be huge. They've got some tricky games in there. Their final 3, though, is what could define their campaign. Burton at home, Oxford away, Cheltenham at home. It depends where those clubs are at in their relegation scrap. Burton and Cheltenham, that is. And of course, Oxford, that could be still 6th versus 7th. Maybe at the likes of Lincoln, Orient and Blackpool have added themselves to that mix. Maybe a few have dropped off. Who knows? But it's pretty tricky. It's pretty tricky. I'd say it's not very kind. I don't think it's very kind. Still Carlisle, Burton and Cheltenham in there as your relegation fights, but a trip to Exeter, a trip to the Valley as well. Those away games aren't very nice. You're hoping those teams haven't got anything to play for and aren't going to be going full throttle, but they're going to look to spoil the party, of course. So, I think Stevenage, I think it's not very kind, to be honest. Peterborough United are the next point of conversation. I look at their next 3 as their most defining. Stevenage at home, Pompey at home, 2 top 6 teams though at home, which does give them that advantage because the rest of their run-in is banana skin central. Cheltenham away, Orient away, Oxford away, Bristol Rovers away. You still got to play Fleetwood. You finish the season off with a home game against Bolton. There's plenty of opportunity to slip up there. Stevenage and Pompey, very difficult. But you don't know what you're going to get with Orient, Wycombe, Bristol Rovers. These teams we expect to be either still in the race, maybe, but probably in that mid-table section. It is very tricky. Very tricky indeed to predict, but also just on face value when looking at their run-in. I see it as not very kind. To still play Stevenage, or have to play Stevenage, Pompey, Oxford away, Bolton away. There's no easy games in League One, but especially those. I think it's not very kind. I think Peterborough will be in the top 6 though, come the end of the season. I don't think that's a conversation to go into too much detail with, to be honest with you. But I think... yeah, I don't think it's very kind. I'm going to put them in not kind. Bolton next is pretty mixed for me. The next 3 games, though, are going to be very, very interesting. And that chunk could be huge when looking at their final outcome. We're talking about a Bolton side pushing for a top 2 finish. Oxford at home, Derby away, Stevenage away. They're tricky. Some very, very tricky games there. Hopefully Oxford make it tricky. We probably won't. You'll know when you're watching this how tricky we made it. But I can tell you, completely neutrally, Derby and Stevenage away are going to be very, very difficult games. You've also still got to play Peterborough away and Pompey at home too, with a visit to Bristol Rovers as a sandwich between those fixtures. It's not very nice. It's not kind, definitely. I think it's ouch. But it's not very kind. Derby, Stevenage, Pompey, Peterborough, 3 of those on the road as well, with a visit of a visit to Bristol Rovers on the list, visitors of Shrewsbury and Port Vale. It's not very kind. It's not very kind. And that's where I'm going to put them. Still, plenty of top 6 opposition for Bolton to face. That's going to make that top 2 hunt very, very tricky. Barnsley next. I've highlighted their final 3 games as their most defining, but I think it could be pretty open for discussion. I've gone with Reading at home, Blackpool away and Northampton away. They're going to be very interesting. The finishing the season with 2 away games is not kind, is it? But I'm looking at the games, Cheltenham, Carlisle, Cambridge, Burton, Reading. They've got winnable games in there. They've still got to go to Fratton Park, Charlton, the Vale, and of course the 2 away games I've mentioned to finish the season off too. But I'm looking at that. I think it's either solid or we'll take it. Having to go to Fratton Park almost drops you down a tier because of how difficult that ground is to go to. But I'm going to say we'll take it for Barnsley. I think there's definitely winnable games in there. Plenty of teams in a relegation scrap which could go either way, in and out of their favour, because they've got everything to lose and to win potentially as well. A trip to Stevenage isn't kind. So I'm going to say we'll take it for Barnsley. Very, very mixed. The issue I've got is a lot of teams in there, I'd say other than Charlton and Carlisle, Northampton, everyone in that fixture list is still playing for something. And that could be a big concern. Derby County currently in 2nd place. Let's see how I define and break up and eventually rank their run into the season. I think I'm looking at the same chunk as Pompey. Spoiler alert, they're the next team. Similar chunk of definement, if that's a word. Bolton at home, Northampton away, Blackpool at home, and then a trip to Pompey on the 2nd of April. That is a very, very interesting 4 games. Bolton, Northampton away, Blackpool, and Pompey at Fratton Park. That's not very kind. That's very, very interesting. Even still, we've got to go to Wycombe, Cambridge. You're hosting Carlisle on the final game of the season. That should be 3 points. But I'm looking at the period between the 16th of April and the 2nd of April. That could be very, very interesting. Derby, will they take it? Or is it not very kind? I'm looking at that run in the middle, well, the end of March to the start of April. You trust Derby. They've got the players. They've got a know-how manager that knows how to deal with this run in this type of promotion, pressure on period of time. They'll take it. But it's going to be make or break. That time, those set of games, is going to be make or break for Derby County. Last but of course not least, I wouldn't do it to you Pompey fans, let's discuss your run-in. On face value, it's very tricky, to be honest. It's very, very tricky. Peterborough away, Barnsley at home, Derby at home, Bolton away, sandwiched between Burton, so that's winnable, should be fine. Wycombe away, Shrewsbury, and then final 2 games, Wigan and Lincoln away on the final game of the season. That could be everything for them. You're looking at the teams in the middle there that maybe haven't got too much to play for. I'm looking at Wigan and Wycombe. But Peterborough, Barnsley, Derby and Bolton are very, very tricky. And of course, they're all still playing for a spot in the top 6. And Derby and Bolton will be looking to leapfrog them in the top 2. And maybe even put on a late title push. I don't think it's going to go as far as that. But of course, whatever the situation, whatever the league table looks like and will look like, they're not very nice games of football to play with 10 games to go, or 9. So, I think it's not kind. I don't think it's kind. I really don't. I think it's a very, very tough run-in. You trust Pompey at home, Barnsley and Derby, not because of the opposition, but because of Pompey and how they're going to make Fratton Park, knowing this is a very, very important part of their run. However, when ranking it, I don't think it's very kind. And that's where I'm going to put them, in the not very kind tier. And that is just about every team covered. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy it, you can leave a like and subscribe for free. This spreadsheet we did put together by hand. It took a while, so please do show your support. But most importantly, in the comments down below, how do you view your run-in? I'll be replying and responding to all of those as per usual. Let me know. Until next time, I've been Jack. This has been the Jack Wood Football Podcast, ranking every single league and club's final fixtures of the season. Take care.